So what's better, a trust or a prenuptial agreement? You can set up an asset protection trust yourself without the intervention of your future spouse. An experienced professional creates the trust, you put your assets into it, established properly and legally. We have seen the proper trust very effectively protect assets from divorce. With a prenuptial agreement, on the other hand, you must hire an attorney who represents only you. Your future spouse must hire a separate attorney that represents only him or her. The two attorneys hammer out the terms. Your fiance's attorney fights for more, yours fights for giving them less. After battling, the two parties usually come to an agreement. You both sign. If there is a divorce, opposing counsel can challenge the validity of the prenuptial agreement. A trust, especially an offshore trust, where the trustee is outside of the jurisdiction of your local court, is very difficult to challenge. In fact, we've never seen one of our clients lose money in a divorce case for whom we have established an offshore asset protection trust. Now, we do help people establish both trust and prenuptial agreements. However, from my decades of experience, we have seen the trust as the most effective option for most people. Hi, I'm the business guy. I'm the CEO of Lawyers Limited Asset Protection Planners, the nation's largest asset protection firm. And the most effective option for keeping up to date right away when new videos come out like this is by clicking the subscribe button and notification bell. And I'd also appreciate it if you could please click the like button so YouTube knows you like this video. Protecting yourself from divorce. You're about to marry the love of your life. Talking about trusts and prenuptial agreements right now isn't exactly romantic, but it's smart. They say marriage is when a man and woman become one. The fighting starts, however, when they try to decide which one. Your assets, especially the high value assets, may be at risk down the line. Divorce may be the last thing on your minds, but the American Psychological Association cites that 40 to 50% of first marriages in the United States end up in divorce. The rate for subsequent marriages is even higher. Even if you and your partner never divorce, there are also outside lawsuits, as well as the future death of a spouse to consider. Without trust, prenuptial agreements, or other asset protection plans, you're vulnerable to the whims of a judge. Now, before he came on board, one of our employees, a Florida barred attorney, went through a nasty divorce. The judge wanted to give the wife 100% of all the assets. The judge figured since he was an attorney, he could make it all back again. What about 50-50, he asked. After all, that's what the law says. Our employee appealed the judge's decision. He won in appeals. He returned back to the judge, and the judge asked, "What do you want me to do for you?" "Abide by the decision of the Court of Appeals," was his reply. The judge says, "Nope, she still gets 100%. In fact, this kind of thing happens every day of the week. Results-oriented judges often cast the law aside and rule as they see fit. That's why an asset protection trust, especially a Cook Islands trust in the South Pacific or a Nevis trust in the Caribbean, are the strongest asset protection tools we can employ. In fact, we've established more of them than anybody on the planet. Our international law firm trustee can step in to protect you when needed. Now, being international, they are not subject to court orders of a rogue judge such as the above. See our video on the Cook Islands Trust for more details. Now, in light of that, how helpful is a trust or prenup? How do you know which strategy is right for you? This video will define a trust and a prenuptial agreement and a postnuptial agreement, then compare them side by side. But don't put your wife side by side if you decide to marry two of them at once. That's called polygamy, and the penalty for that is 2 mother-in-laws. Before we explore the differences between a trust and a prenuptial agreement, we'll define these terms. There are 2 main types of trusts: revocable and irrevocable trusts. Both trusts are important parts of estate planning. These trusts manage and protect assets as the trust grantor or owner ages. The trust verbiage determines how assets are managed and distributed to beneficiaries after their death. Investopedia defines an irrevocable trust as a fiduciary agreement that has terms that cannot be easily modified, amended, or terminated. Or the grantor's named beneficiaries can request that the trustee make certain changes. Conversely, a revocable trust is one in which the grantor can alter or cancel provisions included in the trust. Now, this allows for flexibility and income for the grantor, who earns money from the trust during his lifetime. But an irrevocable trust, properly structured, has the added benefit of protection from creditors. A revocable trust, however, allows the grantor to cancel the trust and reclaim the property at any time. Thus, the grantor's creditor can generally do the same. Once a revocable trust grantor dies, however, the trust becomes irrevocable. A prenuptial agreement is a contract that two people create before entering a marriage. Most often, this agreement focuses on outlining the terms associated with dividing up financial assets and responsibilities at the end of a marriage. Couples decide to get a prenuptial agreement or prenup for a variety of reasons. Professional asset protection planners, such as those in our organization, often create such trusts to protect property as part of a larger estate plan. Setting up a trust before marriage can be one of the keys to keeping assets separate from your partner. Now, there are several benefits to putting your high-value assets into a trust. When an experienced organization such as ours drafts the terms and conditions of a trust carefully, it can be a very effective asset protection strategy. It can even protect your assets in case of legal action against your spouse. The law usually considers an asset placed inside of a trust as separate property as long as you create it before marriage. This is especially important for a business owner or if you own real estate. Putting property into a trust gives ownership of the property to the trust instead of you, so a future ex-spouse has no claim of that property. The law does not consider assets you place in a discretionary trust as belonging to the beneficiary when it comes to alimony. A discretionary trust is one you set up for the benefit of one or more of the beneficiaries. The laws vary state by state, but most states uphold that one can enforce a claim for alimony against a trust that's created prior to marriage. Offshore trusts, however, can effectively protect assets even after marriage. Even when you remain with your partner, a trust is a great asset protection tool. Lawsuits from your business or an auto accident could create a huge financial strain if you aren't prepared. The best way to protect yourself is to make yourself the smallest financial target. Trusts take away the ownership of assets, and the less that you personally own, the less there is for a lawsuit to take away from you. With the right kind of asset protection trust, you can have access to the use of those assets as needed within the protective guidelines. Therefore, a trust can prevent a lot of financial problems no matter what comes your way. I mean, as Henny Youngman said, the secret of a happy marriage remains a secret. People often associate a prenuptial agreement to protect assets with the celebrities and extremely wealthy, but they have many more uses. People of all ages and many different situations can benefit from a prenup. RAG Legal explains if you have a significant premarital estate, it's a good idea to make sure that your spouse will only get as much as you wish they do in the event of divorce or death. This is especially true if you want to protect the inheritance of your children from a previous relationship. A prenup can also protect income and assets acquired during your marriage. Without setting up terms at the beginning of the marriage, you may end up paying unexpected support or alimony to your spouse at the end of it. What you put into a prenuptial agreement is dependent on what's important to you. The requirements by state vary on a prenup, but many of them require that each party have their own attorney present. Doing this prevents a court from declaring the prenuptial agreement invalid. A prenuptial agreement is a binding contract, but you are able to mutually amend it later in the form of a post-nuptial agreement if your circumstances change. Prenuptial agreements are also good ways to protect some of your intangible assets. This includes, but is not necessarily limited to, intellectual property and business ventures. Okay, so which one is better? In our years of experience, the answer for most people is an asset protection trust. To be clear, this is not just any trust. It is a trust you structure specifically with asset protection in mind. Both a trust and a prenuptial agreement have their benefits, but which one is right for you? The answer is that it depends on your situation. Now, if you have significant assets to protect from decades in the asset protection field, the trust is most likely the best choice for you. One of the key differences between these type of asset protection strategies is how many parties they involve. Using a trust to protect assets in divorce is something that you can do alone, whereas a prenuptial agreement requires the agreement and signature of both parties in the marriage. It's also important to note that if you create a prenuptial agreement, it needs to be done right. An agreement that isn't written correctly can leave room for an attorney to find loopholes. Anything not in writing clearly can be contested in divorce court. Like one wife who wanted more affection asked, "Our new neighbor always kisses his wife before he leaves for work. Why don't you do that?" The husband says, "How can I? I don't even know her." The bottom line is this: a prenuptial agreement makes you plan your divorce before you get married. If there's a great way to throw water on the fire of a romance, this is it. If there's a way to get your future spouse's mind to focus on marriage failure before you tie the knot, this is it. He or she will have to hire a separate attorney. Their attorney will go over all the legalities of divorce and will negotiate as much of your assets as possible should the marriage fail. And then after divorce, opposing counsel can poke holes in the validity of the agreement, push for more, and invoke any of a series of theories of legal liability. A proper trust, on the other hand, protects assets regardless of the validity of a prenuptial agreement. Kick it up a notch and set up the asset protection trust and trust bank account offshore. When you do this, the offshore trust takes the assets out of the jurisdiction of your local courts. For decades, we have established offshore trusts and have not seen one client lose money through a judgment or divorce proceeding. So no matter which strategy you use, it's a good idea to have an open and honest conversation with your partner about your finances and assets before marriage. Once you've created a plan, you should also keep their stipulations in mind. Some of your actions after the marriage may void the conditions of the prenuptial agreement, but it should have no bearing on the validity of your offshore asset protection trust. If it is a domestic trust, however, adding joint assets to a personal trust could lead the court to deem those assets as marital property. Alternatively, a judge could invalidate the domestic trust altogether. Not so with a properly structured offshore trust. But I'm already married. Marriage is like deleting all the apps on your cell phone except for one. And if you're already married, is it too late to protect yourself in a future divorce? The answer is no. There are still many ways of protecting assets after marriage. The most important thing is to focus on keeping everything that you want separate, truly separate. For any property that's only in your name, you should keep or create your own separate bank account to pay for any expenses. Using joint funds on that property could lead it to being considered joint property down the road. Any joint funds used to pay for real estate or mortgages often turns that property into marital property. Keep track of all your premarital documentation. Account statements from banks, brokerage, or retirement accounts from the previous month can help establish their value. Keep any copies of wills or trust that show inheritance along with account statements. If you had your business or other hard-to-value property appraised before marriage, those documents can be important in showing their value. Continue to keep good records for all separate accounts. Another option is a post-nuptial agreement. This agreement is very similar to a prenup, except that it is created after a couple is already married. This contract is especially helpful if a couple wants to divide things up differently than the laws of their state would otherwise dictate. This written agreement is a more secure way to lay out who owes what than any verbal promises or understandings between couples. The postnuptial agreement has the same or more weaknesses than the prenup. If the marriage is already on shaky ground, forget it. The attorney who you must hire for your spouse to put it together will likely eat you alive. You can set up an asset protection trust, on the other hand, without involvement from your spouse. Naturally, co-owned property such as real estate will require mutual agreement. Another huge problem we've seen with postnups is that they're usually brought up after love is on the rocks. In such a combative environment, the guard is already up and the willingness to cooperate low. So at that point, establishing an offshore asset protection trust where you place your assets beyond the reach of the courts may be one of the only effective options. Postnups are tough when the light at the end of the tunnel is the divorce train coming your way. Final steps before the big day. One husband asked his wife, "Why do you keep reading our marriage license over and over again?" His wife replied, "I'm looking for an expiration date." Whether you choose a trust, a prenuptial agreement, or something else, make sure you're doing it right. Contact our experienced attorneys and consultants today. We'll help you better understand your options and ensure that you have the proper legal tools in place. Planning for a wedding is exciting and time-consuming, but don't use it as an excuse to put off protecting yourself and your assets. By doing the financial work up front, you'll be prepared for whatever life has in store and regardless of what happens in your relationship. Please click like, subscribe, and share this video with others. Thanks for watching. This is The Business Guy.